Okay. Hey, hello. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Let's Build That App.com channel. Hope you guys are doing well out there, and I hope you're ready for episode number 16 of the SwiftUI Firebase chat series. In the very last video, I showed you guys how to integrate the Firestore codable objects inside of our project. Let me quickly show you what that looks like here inside of the recent message model. So you see we have our Firebase Firestore kind of dependency up here. We have our document ID, and all of our objects are now conforming to codable like so. And if you look at chat message, I also provided this change in the downloaded source code solution. So make sure to go download that and take a look as to how this is implemented. If you launch your project now, let me just hit the play on the top left. It's going to launch our app right inside of our Pro Max simulator. If you take a look at it, we are logged in as Steve right here, and I added some helpers to my recent message rows there. You'll see that the Pikachu, leaves, waterfall 1, and the fields, those user names are coming from this quick little getter function there. And then take a look all the way on the right side in the blue, 28 minutes ago, 31, 44, and 45 minutes. That's being achieved by using Swift 5.1. There's now this thing called a relative datetime formatter that's available. And, basically you set up your properties here. You can make it as complicated as you want, but essentially I'm returning a string called time ago using this guy. And if you look at the main message view and just search for time ago in the project, you should see this guy right over here. And if you want to give this the foreground color of maybe color dot label, you'll see this will turn into black like that. Okay, so hopefully you guys are able to pick up on these changes so far. In today's video, I want to discuss something else related to Firestore and Firebase and listening to data changes. And basically, let me illustrate a problem with my application now. First, I'm going to load up the iPhone 13 Pro simulator, and let me just bring this guy back up in the Pro Max, and then it's going to build for the Pro right now. So let me just tab into the 13 Pro, and it'll launch right here for everyone to see. So let me illustrate this problem here, and some of you guys might have noticed this already, but if you are logged in as, let's say, waterfall 1 here, if you log out, right? If you sign out and you sign back into the application as this Steve user, you should see these 4 messages here instead of these 2, right? In other words, the application should automatically update itself with the proper messages. But if you log out and sign in, you're not going to see this, but you'll see this kind of obsolete list of messages here. Let me show you what I mean. Let's perform the actual sign out here and, quickly log back in, steve@gmail.com, 123123, log back in. Again, you won't see this entire list because this is a stale listener for your Firestore data. So let me show you how to fix this issue here, and then we'll talk about another screen where the listening isn't exactly foolproof. Let me go ahead and slide this bad boy out of the way. And the quick fix to all of this is to go back into main message view, right? Which is this screen here. And all you have to do is this. So let me close out of that. And whenever you sign out, right? So you can look for the sign out function here. You're handling the sign out. And whenever that happens, you want to make sure you are kind of resetting the data. And the way everything works is whenever we go into this login view right here, we actually complete the login process through this callback, and then we fetch our current user again. So all that's left is to call self.vm.fetch recent messages and just use it like that. This is a private function, so we are going to make sure that it is accessible. This is pretty easy. We are going to go up to here, remove the private modifier for that function. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch this in the simulator again. It's just a little easier to illustrate this process with a simulator. We see that we're now logged in as Steve, and we reloaded our app, so everything looks just the same here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign out of my application one more time. Hit the sign out, and I will log back in as, let's just use the Pikachu user. So I have a new user called Pikachu, and I'll log back in. So once you log back in, right, you'll see that Pikachu is showing up on the top left. And this list right here, it's somewhat refreshed correctly, somewhat. We have 5 messages here, and I believe these 4 rows at the very bottom are no longer correct. We should be seeing just this one row there. And the way I'm going to go ahead and fix this issue is to go back to the sign out section. So sign out right here, and you just want to make sure that you empty out the messages. So you can go back to fetch recent messages, and whenever you execute this function, you can go somewhere down here and say self.recentMessages.remove all. That's going to remove all the messages that are obsolete. Okay, that looks pretty good. I will try to log in as a kind of a new user again. So Pikachu has 1 message here. I'm going to log out and log back in as Steve, and you should only see 4 messages. So pretty good, and I'll log back in here. Let's make sure everything is working, and everything should be a-okay. So log back in, I have 4 messages that look just like that. All right, so nothing too bad with this solution here, right? One thing that you might not notice right off the bat here is that there's actually somewhat of a memory leak inside of your application right now. And the way to illustrate this is a little bit tricky because I have 2 simulators up. And let me go ahead and let me just go in the code here and show you where this memory leak is. So, whenever we start up our application and we have our, main message view here, right? We initialize our main messages view model. Inside of this initializer, we call the fetch recent messages, and further down below, we're adding something called a snapshot listener to this Firestore collection, and essentially it's listening for all of these document changes below inside of the closure. Now, whenever you add this listener, you actually have to remove it inside of your code somewhere. And the problem with not removing it is that whenever you log out of your application, let's say you log out of Steve, right? You are still listening for the messages that Steve is interested in, but you really shouldn't. It's actually going to make the cost of your Firebase database just more expensive for really no reason. So the fix to this is to make sure that you add a listener to this guy, or you make sure you capture a reference to the listener which you can stop listening to. It might sound a little bit complicated, but here is the solution. I'm going to go right here, use a private variable, and you can just say listener and maybe, Firestore listener. That sounds like a better name. And we will set this as the listener registration. So I'll just initialize that as an optional nil object like so. All right, I'm going to build, and you should see everything is going to be a-okay. And that looks fine, no errors so far. Okay, one question you might be having is that how do you know it's a listener registration, right? Well, if you command click into this right here, it tells you, or not command, but option click, you'll bring up this little documentation helper window, and then you'll see that it is a listener registration here. It's a kind of returns a Fire listener registration. Instead of Swift, it's called this right here. Objective-C has that FIR. Okay, now having this reference, you can set this listener to this guy just by doing this like that. In other words, your listener will actually be set to something. And this listener, you can disable it by calling this right here. So Firestar listener dot, I believe it's remove, and it tells you that it removes this listener from, tracking the Firestore data changes. So that's what we will actually call in the sign out process. So you can, I guess you can call it here if you really wanted to. Yeah, so I guess we'll do that here. Firestore listener and remove all, or remove for that, and remove all for the messages. All right, so that is pretty good. I'm going to rerun this one more time, and you'll see everything still works just as it did before, but we're not listening for unnecessary messages anymore. Okay, so here is my simulator, the iPhone 13 Pro. I will go ahead and hit the sign out here. Just want to make sure things actually do work. So let's use the Pikachu user@gmail.com and 123123 there. And that looks pretty good. We still get our messages there. I'm going to message this Pikachu user using the Steve person here. So let's message the Pikachu user. Hope you are able to still see this message. And I'm going to hit send there. It's going to show up here, and it also shows up right here as the Steve message below. And that looks pretty good. One other issue that you'll have to fix as well is also related to the listening of messages. So for example, inside of this screen, right? This screen with all the messages, it's actually the view inside of I believe we have chat log view somewhere. Where are you? Chat log view. It's right here somewhere. So where are you? I believe I moved everything into this utils folder. Not that helpful. So I'll just move it back to somewhere right here. I think that should be okay. All right, nothing too bad. And you can kind of try again. Everything should work itself out. So maybe moving your folders around isn't the best thing to do, but I'm going to just build my project. This should be fine there. Okay, so quickly, let me show you a bug with our application right now that occurs inside of this fetch messages. You'll see that this screen, right? We're also fetching all of these messages using this snapshot listener, just like we did in this screen here. So we have this issue where whenever we kind of not log out, but whenever we get back to this screen, let's say we are messaging this Pikachu user, right? Let me just look for Pikachu here. I'm listening for all the messages that are inserted inside of this collection. The moment that I hit back right here, I really shouldn't be listening to those messages anymore, right? I'm not using them for anything, so I should really stop listening. So let me just illustrate how to track an issue like this by using some print statements inside of my chat log view. I'm going to go ahead and go inside of fetch messages for chat log view. And whenever a new message comes in, we're inside of this block of code for document changes. And whenever we insert a new message, we're actually here inside of the append call. So I'm going to say print a pending chat message in chat log view. All right. So make sure you're writing something descriptive and you know where this message is coming from. I'm just simply using a print statement. If you're using a logger, that might be much more helpful for determining where these messages are coming from. But for simplicity, I'll just use a print statement like that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let's see, what do I want to do here? I'm going to rerun this inside of the iPhone Pro simulator. And this should be relatively easy to follow. Okay, so here we go. We have Pikachu logged in as that person there. I'm going to move this just slightly behind me. And then I'm going to go ahead and launch the application again inside of the iPhone Pro Max. And I'll show you what happens inside of the console, and you'll see kind of the bug that I'm trying to illustrate. So we are now for this Pro Max in the top right corner where we are currently the Steve user. I'm going to open up the Pikachu chat area, which is this right here. This is the Pikachu chat area, right? So that looks pretty good. I'm going to load the actual user here, and I'm going to start messaging the Steve user on that corner there. So Steve, where are you? Over here. And you'll see in the back console area, as I type messages, here is a message, and hit the send here. You'll see I'm appending all these messages to the kind of this area inside of this, blue and white message block, right? And another. All right, so send, you'll see a bunch of log messages appear like that. So there are currently, about 10 messages, right? If I now go back inside of this view, and if I message the Steve user again, you'll see that it'll still print out these log messages, but it really shouldn't be printing out anything. So I'll just say 1, 2, 3 and hit the send here. So again, there are these kind of log messages being printed out, which means that I'm still listening for these messages inside of this snapshot listener, but I don't really care about these messages anymore, right? I'm no longer inside of that Pikachu screen, which is this right here. So the question is now, how do I fix this issue, right? Well, let me go ahead and apply a very similar fix to this screen. So here is my chat log view. And we are going to declare a private var. Let's call it the Firestore listener again, and we will use the listener registration. Obviously, let it be nil. And then whenever we start off this fetch process, we'll just call the remove function. And that looks okay. Well, is that okay? So maybe we don't need this. I think what I need to do is I need to track when this back button is being pressed. One easy way of doing that is to just use the on disappear. So whenever I click that, right, that whole view will disappear, which is this chat log view. We are inside of the body view, and you can just use on disappear like so, and you can do vm.firestore listener and just call remove there. Now this is private, so I'll have to fix that real quickly. Just remove this right here. And now I'm going to rerun this inside of the simulator there. Maybe I will append the date to that guy. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And let's see, this is the optional type right here. And I think I'm ready to rock and roll with my simulator yet again. So this is the Pro Max. We're currently looking at the Pro Max back there. I'm going to click in the Pikachu user, just click into this, and we're loaded up with this screen, right? So if I go 1, 2, 3 and hit the send right there, you'll see that I'm listening for the messages back here. So that looks pretty good. If I message myself again with something like ABC, send, you'll see these messages appear like so. If I now go back on this screen right here, and if I message that user again, right, you'll see that I've removed the listener on the disappear function and no longer see console messages. All right, so send right here, and that should fix the issue, but for whatever reason, it's not working just yet. So I believe one final fix is to make sure that this Firestore listener is actually non-nil. Let me just fix that bug right here. Go back to fetch messages. All we got to do is to make sure that this is actually set to the snapshot listener. All right. Quick little bug, and we'll fire off this guy one more time to make sure that the messages do not appear. So we are listening to Pikachu@gmail.com. We are going to say 1, 2, 3. Messages are coming in. Hit the back there, and let's see. This looks okay. Let's go with this right here. So test one more time. Hit the send, and these messages are still showing up. So one thing that I will try to do is this here. Let's go with the Firestore listener, and I'm going to make sure that whenever I hit the on disappear, where are we? On disappear, this should fire correctly. So hit that. We are going to hit the Pikachu user here, and I'm going to hit back right here. So whenever that fires, the Firestore listener should remove itself. And let's go with the VM is right here, and then the wrapped value. We see that our Firestore listener should be removing itself. And I'm not exactly sure why this bug is still happening. Alrighty, everyone. So I just spent about 30 minutes looking at this issue here with the chat log view and also the fetch messages function. And it looks like the real problem that we're experiencing with our application now is that the fetch message function, this right here, is being called a lot more than we would like. So let me illustrate this whole problem again by launching our Pro Max on the top right. I'm gonna put a breakpoint here, and some of you should try to guess how many times this guy is being called, right? So you're fetching your messages through this initializer here, and this chat log view model is only being created every time you navigate to this screen right there, right? So whenever you click on there, you should navigate to the chat log view. And whenever that happens, you are fetching your messages like so. And the real issue is that whenever I go back to another simulator, so this person is the Pikachu user, right? So let me find our Steve Jobs again. Whenever I message the user, you'll see this this fetch message on line 23 will get invoked again. So another invocation of fetch messages, something like that. So hit the send, and you'll see we're initializing this listener guy yet again. And the real reason why that happens is because when you're creating this view here, you're updating this view with the new messages. And whenever that happens, it'll redraw the entire kind of view hierarchy. And when that happens, you get some listeners, you get some view models kind of just disappearing and being recreated just to make sure your views are correct. So long story short, this view model object, it's being initialized in a way that we can't really predict using SwiftUI. So whenever I run into this issue, and I've actually fixed this issue before in another project, whenever this happens, right, you really want to control where this initializer is being called. So currently, we would expect this initializer to be called somewhere down below. So let me go back to my chat log view, which is right here. And we are initializing this chat user every time our view is being initialized or every time our chat log view is being initialized, we are initializing our view model with this on 170. So you would assume that works, but the chat log view, this view right here, is being created like really, really often, and it's not really predictable when it's being created as well. So whenever this happens, I would almost prefer to create this view model, this chat log view model here. I prefer to create it inside of the actual view right here instead. This way I can control it a little better. In other words, I don't really want to use this initializer. So this guy here is not really that helpful for me. And what I'll do is I'm going to show you how to fix this issue. I'm going to comment all that out, and that should be okay. Once you comment that out, you'll run into this problem where the chat user is no longer accessible. So it should be accessible on the view model. So that should be, that error should go away. Now, whenever you remove this initializer, you'll see that the areas in which you have the chat log view, you can no longer use that initializer. So the question is, well, what should the fix really be, right? Well, the chat log view, you can see if you open this guy up again, you have the default initializer of the view model that you can pass in. So you can create the view model in this area instead. So, you can do this, but you are going to run into the same issue where this navigation link, it might be called pretty often. So what I mean is this, if you put a breakpoint here and you're messaging your users, this view model is being initialized a lot. So you're still going to be listening to a lot of messages. So, one better way to fix all of these problems is to, you see this view model object, right? I'm going to create it as a private reference here. So private var, and I'll call this the chat log view model. And I will declare it as the chat log view model like this here. And you can even construct it using this, I believe. So let me see if this works. So I'm going to use this right here, and the chat log can be a nil user at the very beginning. Once you have that, you can pass in your view model to this right here, and I will cancel out of that. So I'm going to build one more time with Command R and launch inside of this view there. And you should be able to see some different behavior in the console. Now I'm going to launch into this view here, and you see no messages are showing up, which is something different. So no messages in the console either. Just at the send, you'll see nothing is being printed out because currently messages are not being fetched inside of our chat log view and view model. So the fix to all of this is actually pretty easy. Let me just remove that commented line. Don't need that anymore. And whenever we're inside of this view here, whenever we, click a new user, whenever, somewhere right here, we click Pikachu, or right here, you click on Pikachu. Whenever we do that, we're simply executing one line of code. And let me go ahead and see where we are at here. So I believe we have a view called new message view, or create new message. So let me look for this guy right, create new message. Whenever we select one of these users here, we're just simply executing this code. And whenever, we're here, right? You can simply say self.chat-log-view-model.chat-user equals the user that you're selecting here. And whenever that happens, you can then call self.chat-log-view-model.fetch messages like so. And this, I believe, might be a private function. So we are here. I think we need an optional to fix this. I think that's an optional there. And this guy is a private function. So we are here. We've removed that. And let's see. What is this top guy complaining about? So the chat user on this is a let. So I'll fix those two issues right now by going back into the chat log view. At the very top, we have our view model. This guy right here, you want to make sure it's a var so you can reset it whenever you want. And then we want to make sure that the fetch messages call is public like so. Alrighty, I think that's kind of what I want to do now. Okay, hopefully this should start working again. I believe I need to go in this view to, make sure everything works. So I'll go into that right here, and you'll see all my messages are showing up again, right? So A, B, C, D, E, F. You'll see send, and we'll see a pending chat message, and we'll only see it once because now we have this better solution where our view model is being controlled somewhat more manually. And if I go back into this view, right, I'll say A, B, C, D, E, F one more time, hit the send, and whenever, another message here, hit the send. The previous issue where we have all those console messages being printed out, that's no longer showing up in here because we're not invoking fetch messages over and over sort of unpredictably. All right, so that's kind of the fix that I have for everyone. If I click into this, you'll see this guy, which I'm not sure if that's what we want. Click into the leaves. We have all the Pikachu messages here. So I will fix one last issue and I'll let you go. All right, I'm going to go into my, let's see, where is my view code? These Swift files are pretty long. So we have our messages view here, which is somewhere right here. Now, sort of kind of on my own time, I implemented this bit of code, and the scroll view of messages are now, they're all a button. So these guys are now buttons, and the button is just what you saw before. It's your H stack with your messages and your icons, right? And whenever you click on these rows or these buttons now, we are figuring out what our chat user needs to be right here using this initializer. And it's just using the email and then the profile image URL and the UID from your actual user. And it's nothing too complicated, but you'll have to look at it on your own to truly understand what's going on. And we just want to do the same thing that we had before. Chat log view model and chat user equals self dot, just you can do that now. And then you can perhaps invoke the fetch message call again. So what this is going to do is every time you click on the message row, it's simply going to sort of refresh everything. And hopefully that's going to work. I am going to go inside of the Pikachu user here. We have pikachu@gmail.com. We have leaves@gmail.com. I think these messages are not correct, or are they correct? I can't really tell. So waterfall, and there's a lot of messages here that I don't want to see. So I'll go back into the chat log view model again. And whenever I'm fetching messages, I am also going to do one more additional check, which is chat log messages. I'll remove everything from the array, and I think that's the final fix that I need. So keeping track of everything is always a little tricky in your iOS apps. Clicking into Pikachu, we have this long list. Leaves, we have 2 messages there. We have waterfall, looks like that. And then the final user, we just have simply 3 messages like so. Alrighty, so that is how you fix this issue with the listener registration, right? Again, whenever you have your SwiftUI application and when it contains a navigation view type of hierarchy, right? So let me go back to main messages view, and we have our main body, which is a navigation view. Whenever you have this hierarchy and whenever you're navigating into a different view that's being pushed onto the stack, you'll run into these issues where this entire view itself will just redraw and you might not even see it. And the reason for that is whenever these navigation links right here, whenever they get activated, it's very hard to predict what is being recreated. In the previous case, we were pretty much recreating our chat log view for a lot of these navigation areas. And whenever that happens, you can't really guess what's going to occur with your view model objects. So the fix that we introduced for today's video was to introduce a reference to the actual chat log view model instead of our main view here. And what this really means is that we can control what is being fetched, when it needs to be fetched for whichever user that we're clicking on. Again, you'll try to use this solution whenever this situation arises. And you can imagine that if you log out of this user of Steve right here, you might see a problem with this chat log view model. You might need to do some further resetting, I suppose, but I guess so far everything is kind of good. All right, so if you guys have any questions about questions about any of this stuff, I can see that it does get confusing rather quickly if you are not the author of the code. So make sure to leave a question down below, and I'll provide this entire project down below as well. I'll see you guys next time.